and welcome to the Holistic Health and Hormones podcast. I'm Ellie Huang, your guide to unlocking the secrets of vibrant health and balanced hormones. Together, we'll explore empowering strategies, holistic healing modalities, expert insights, and client stories to help you reclaim your vitality and live in harmony with your body. Whether you're navigating the journey of motherhood, seeking natural solutions, or striving for optimal well-being and wanting to live a long and healthy life, you're in the right place. Let's embark on this transformative journey to health, healing, and happiness, one mindful step at a time. Ready? Let's dive in. Have you ever wondered why no matter what you do, you can't shift your weight? Or that you feel like you can't get your body's hormones into balance, even though you feel you are eating right and sleeping 8-9 hours a night? In today's episode, we speak to an experienced naturopath and holistic nutritionist about the common myths and misconceptions when it comes to our hormones and some great tips on how we can understand the signs and manage that. So let's dive in. Hello, and welcome to the Holistic Health and Hormones podcast. I'm super excited to have Dr. Valerie Franc with me. She is a dynamic and inspirational naturopathic doctor, a nutritionist, educator, and speaker with over 25 years of clinical experience. She has traveled the world learning different forms of medicine, including hypnosis, yoga, and Ayurvedic medicine. And she's also advanced training in acupuncture and traditional Chinese medicine in China. She's currently in Toronto and she thrives running a huge family practice and is a passionate advocate for naturopathic principles. She's a teacher at the Canadian College of Naturopathic Medicine, the Canadian School of Natural Nutrition, and has co-hosted Create Your Holistic Lifestyle radio show. She has worked extensively with professional athletes, supported the Vanuatu women's beach volleyball team during their pro tour through Italy and at the Commonwealth Games, and she's an accomplished speaker. She's also delivered presentations all over the world and runs her own podcast, Dr. Val Saves Dale. Welcome, Valerie. I'm so excited to have you. We just had a quick chat and oh my goodness, we could talk for hours and hours, I think.
I think we could, and thank you so much for the invitation. I'm really excited about this podcast, and again, I think we could spend hours just unpacking all of the issues around hormones and around the mind-body connections. I'm really excited about today.
Yeah, so let's get straight into it. Like, we'd love to talk about basically the myths and misconceptions about hormonal health, and just basically maybe a quick background about how you got into working with specifically hormonal health, what got you into the whole holistic journey, and then I guess some of the common misconceptions you've come across in basically 25 years of practice and probably a little bit longer. Yeah, so let's chat about yourself and how you got into this whole area to begin with.
Thank you so much. I've had the typical healer's journey.
Okay.
So I started out basically in university studying nutrition. And when I graduated with an undergraduate degree, I thought I knew everything and my own health was suffering. And so I went to see my medical doctor. She did every test underneath the sun and everything came back normal. And she
Yeah.
told me, "You're okay. You're fine. This is just stress." Now, I was already sleeping 10, 12 hours. I'd be up for an hour. I'd have to go back to bed. I'm like,
Wow.
this is not a solution. How am I going to sleep more than I'm already sleeping? That's a
How can you
coma.
sleep more than 12 hours and still be tired, right?
Right. I thought, you know what, there's something here. And the answers that I was getting from my medical doctor, as well trained as she was, as amazing as she was, she just didn't have the answers. So everything that she was looking at was telling me I was fine, but I knew I wasn't. That's not a
Mm,
way that you can live life. So on the advice of my aunt, I went to see her naturopath. I figured I have nothing else to lose. And
yeah.
her naturopath said to me, "Hey, this is your food, this is your diet."
Yeah.
And I was like, how could this be? I have an undergraduate degree in nutrition. I know
Wow.
everything. I'm
Right.
thinking
Yeah.
at that point in time. And the people that I spoke to in my university years, they thought they had all the answers.
Hmm.
But sure enough, when I talked to my naturopath and I switched up the foods that I was eating, my health turned around like that. That's when I
Yeah.
became hooked. And I was like, you guys have secret knowledge because it's not that my medical doctor was bad. It's
No.
not that there was nothing wrong with her. She was great at what she did. And she helped a lot of people. And I had a lot of great information from my university. It's not like this was a fly-by-night university for nutrition. It's one of the
Mm.
best in North America. And yet there was this whole field of study and this whole aspect of medicine that they just didn't have access to.
Well, I
So
think the
my
knowledge, I mean, with doctors, they have so much training in pharmaceuticals, right? General practitioners, but they don't focus much on diet. And diet, food is everything, right? What we put in our mouth, food is medicine, pretty
in North
much.
America, the
Yeah.
most the at best they're going to get half a semester of
Yeah.
nutrition training.
Couple of hours. Yeah.
So they're not going to know a lot of
No.
those answers. But let's talk about this because I
Yeah.
want to be really frank because that's my last name. And so
Yeah. Matters.
when I was talking to a lot of the people in the university that I went to for nutrition and nutritional sciences, they didn't know this information either. So
Wow.
there was a way of looking at food and nutrition that was under their radar screen that they didn't have access to that information.
Yeah.
So then I was like, I want to know the secret knowledge. So that's where I went and I became a naturopathic doctor. And I learned so much from
Wow.
this whole new perspective about nutrition, about herbs, we talked about traditional
Yeah.
Asian medicine.
Yeah.
And then from there, I got out into practice and I thought, I'm going to save the world.
Yes.
And when I was doing that, and I went in for nutrition. I went in because I was feeling a little tired and run down. But when I was there, my naturopath said to me, by the way, those things called PMS, those quote unquote symptoms that you're calling normal, those menstrual symptoms like fatigue and cramping and, maybe some bloating or cravings,
Yeah.
none of that has to happen. That's not normal. That's common.
And
And
what
I
was the
went,
age? What was this age
well,
approximately?
I was in my mid-20s at that point in time.
Wow, mid-20s is early to be going through. You think you've just come out of teenage years. We do know that our hormones fluctuate, obviously, if you've got sort of late menarche, but during your 20s, it should be settled, supposedly. You should be living your best life in your 20s.
Well, and here's what's happening to a lot of young women. They get their menstrual cycle and it's painful. They don't know who to turn to. They go to their medical doctor and their
Yes.
medical doctor says, "Hey, the best solution that we have or the only solution we have is here. Why don't you go on the birth control pill? Because
Oh,
that'll
the
just."
oral contraceptive. Yes.
Right. And so that's what you think. Oh, I'm having some acne.
Mm,
This is painful. It's
yes,
interfering. It's heavy bleeding.
correct.
I'm just going to do this. And then you end up on it for a long period of time.
Yeah.
And, during university, I came off of it because I was finally like, listen, I've got a ton of acne right now because of the
Right.
stress.
Yep.
The birth control pill
It's
isn't
not going to affect
controlling it. Why,
it.
why am I taking this thing? So
Yeah.
I ended up coming off of it. But, still, I had these symptoms that were unresolved. And it wasn't until I saw a naturopath where my naturopath said, hey, by the way,
Yeah.
let's get rid of that because it's
Yes.
really easy to get rid of that. And although you think this is normal,
Yeah.
it's not normal, it's common, and there's a difference.
Correct. I know so many people will suffer, like you said, the acne, the painful periods, and the Western doctor have no solutions. They're not looking at diet. They haven't even questioned what they're eating. And it's normal for a teenager or someone in university to have the stress, right? We have to look at what is underlying there. And so, yep, it's not just a band-aid fix. Here, have the oral contraceptive. And then when they want to conceive, this is what I see. When they want to conceive in their 30s, they've been on it for 20 years. And what has that done to their hormones, or not doing to their hormones, I should say? Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, and then I did the thing where I got into practice and I started, looking at providing the best treatment for my patients and started exploring and treating and getting my protocols down. And I hit this wall, which I'm sure, knowing you and knowing your trajectory and what you've studied, you've probably hit the same thing where you have all of these great ideas and say, this is what you need to be doing. And
Yeah.
then my patients couldn't always access it. They're like, I
Yeah.
can't make these changes.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay,
Uh-huh.
now I got to go study the mind, body, spirit.
Mm,
Because it's not just about it's because it's simple to say, take this supplement, eat this food,
correct.
don't eat that food.
And is your body
Great.
absorbing it, right? Are they using that nutrition? You could give them a whole bag of supposedly natural supplements and herbs, and yet you're like, why hasn't it made a difference? What else is happening? What other pathways are being blocked?
And you can give all of the best
Yeah.
protocols and strategies, and you could be working with their digestion, but if they can't implement them,
Yes.
well, it's just all out the window. So I was
Mm,
like, okay, now let's look at the mind-body connection
yeah.
and see why is it that you're having challenges putting these strategies into place. So I
Mm.
studied hypnosis, much like you did.
Yes, I love hypnosis. Amazing.
And I just went on this fun little tour of the entire world thinking, I just want to learn as much as I can about
Yeah.
different forms of medicine.
Yep.
So I learned about yoga and I learned about Ayurvedic medicine and I studied in
Yeah.
China and just
Yeah.
had an amazing experience there and was doing all of this learning. And throughout that time, got had this successful practice, was in this relationship that was, very, it was a long-term relationship, but ended up being a very stressful relationship. There's a lot
Mm.
going on. And now I'm in my 30s, my mid 30s, and my
Mhm.
hormones start to go off balance because of the stress.
Mm.
And my hormones, because I was under so much stress, that go, 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 go,
Yeah.
my
Burnout.
hormones stopped. My menstrual cycle stopped for 2 years,
I see that a
completely
lot.
gone.
Yeah, they just disappear one day for clients. And it's like, where'd it go? And years later, you think, oh, it's good at the beginning, not having a period. But if it's been 1 or 2 years, you're like, this is not normal. Like, where has it gone? It shouldn't be just disappeared one day.
If you asked me if I was under stress, I would have said, not really. Like
Mm.
going through some stuff, but you know what I mean? Like I'm not melting down. I'm not
Yes.
crying. I'm not having a breakdown.
Yeah.
It's not like I've lost a ton of weight. I'm not, drinking myself under the table. I'm not like there's
Not the
nothing.
typical stress signs.
Right. And so then I went to see my medical doctor was like, okay, look, you have to see a specialist. So I went to see an OB.
Yeah.
And he was absolutely lovely. Saw this lovely gynecologist who said, listen, this is because I was wondering if this was cancer now, because I'm like, okay, I'm bloated and I have no menstrual cycle. What's
Right.
going on?
Yeah.
And so I just wanted to make sure that it was not ovarian cancer because Dr. Google and
Yeah. Dr.
overload
Google.
knowledge is a really bad thing. I'm like, I know what this could be. And he's like, no, it's just you've developed polycystic ovaries. And I've
Mm.
never had that in the past, but I learned that there's something called secondary polycystic ovaries that happens to women when they're under stress. And
Yeah.
their hormones go off balance because of the stress. And I would have thought I was fine. My weight was normal, so it wasn't like I
Yeah. It
was,
wasn't typical PCOS signs. Yeah.
it wasn't. And
No.
so then I realized, and he said to me, he was very honest, and he said, we're not going to do anything to treat this. Because he's like, okay, it's polycystic ovaries. I'm like, oh, I know how to deal with this. Now we're fine.
So was it just bloods? Was it just the bloods that you'd seen? Was it just high testosterone levels? Was it like an imbalance of your LH and FSH, or was it specifically like cysts that they could see from the scans?
They could see cysts on the
Wow.
ultrasound. So they
Mm,
did a transvaginal ultrasound and they
yeah.
did
And
the
they
blood
saw,
work. And the blood was off and the cysts
okay,
were
so
there.
matched up. Yeah.
So, and so I was just like, okay, that's a lot of stress. So,
Yes.
but I know what to do to bring it back into alignment, not a big deal, which really was a really helpful thing in my career because now I know women in their 30s, when their menstrual cycle stops, or if they're saying to me, like, hey, I'm having these symptoms of perimenopause and I'm being
Mm,
told I'm going into menopause, I'm like, oh,
yeah.
no, you're not.
Yeah.
This is stress. I know how to treat this. Like we can
Yeah.
turn this around. Don't worry.
Did you look at cortisol levels at all? Because I know, like, I do some testing with cortisol. Is it something that you've come across, or, because you were saying your stress levels went high, but possibly testing them, you may have seen, the trajectory, or I guess the cortisol was imbalanced at certain times of the day, perhaps, right? Because we may have low grade
At-
stress that's throwing off
yeah.
our when our
At,
cortisol is supposed to spike.
at that point in time, I didn't take a
Mm.
look at cortisol levels. I knew they were high. I knew they were going to be high all day. I was just like, I'm just treating
Yeah.
this. And,
Yeah.
and I could have. And I think that there would have been a lot of value. It's certainly
Mm.
something that I do now.
Yeah.
And fast forward when I
Yeah.
got to my late 40s, when I was in my late 40s, my hormones started shifting again. Now, this time,
Mm.
it's not that I was under a lot of particular stress, but at that particular point in time, it was just you're 47, your hormones are starting to readjust. And so what ended up happening for me is I noticed I was just suddenly starting to gain weight and I couldn't lose it. And so I was working
Common,
with
isn't it? Is that fairly
it,
common? Because I've
it
seen
was
at perimenopause stage of 45 to 50, some of the weight is coming on. Sometimes it could have been people think it's after a baby or babies. Other people like it's just not shifting. Like I'm working out more, supposedly eating less, but the weight is still happening, right?
That's exactly what had started to happen. And for me, I wasn't having any other signs of
Right,
perimenopause.
right.
I was having regular cycles. I
Yeah.
wasn't having any hot flashes. I wasn't having
Mm,
any other sign. It was just suddenly I had this extra weight on that normally I would have been no problem to take off and it wasn't coming off. And
mm.
I started working with someone who actually was a former student of mine, who's also a bodybuilder, who put bodybuilders on
Right,
stage, who knew what he was
right.
talking about.
Yeah.
And I did what every single other woman out there does under
Mhm.
that case. I just thought, I'm just going to do a fitness competition. I'll work with a
Yeah, right.
bodybuilder, personal trainer,
Yeah.
we'll do that. It's fine. And I was doing everything that he said, and nothing changed, nothing
Still.
moved.
Wow.
And he was looking at me, and I find this is so common with women when
Mm.
hormones are out of balance. They will do everything that is supposed to work according to the calorie in, calorie out model,
Yeah. Yes.
and nothing budges. And
Hmm.
then, and if my personal trainer, if he didn't know me like he knew me, he would have been like, "You're just not doing what I say." But he
Yeah,
was
you're not
like,
working hard enough. You're not eating less, right? Or you're not eating enough
He's like,
protein.
he's like, I know you. He's like, I know
Mm.
you're doing exactly what I'm saying. I
Yeah.
don't get this.
Mm.
So that's at that point in time, I started to do more research and started to take a look into, okay, how do you actually eat to rebalance hormones?
Yeah.
Kind of rediscovered a lot of what I did with polycystic ovaries, and I ended up eating more, exercising less, and ended up dropping the weight. In fact, I was like just so curious as to what my body would do when I ate to rebalance my hormones and
Right.
exercise to rebalance my hormones that I actually just wanted to say, like, I wonder what this can do. And I got
Yeah.
down to 14% body fat
Wow.
with, without counting calories,
Wow. And
without
that's seeing
being
some
in
people get very obsessed with counting calories when they're trying to lose weight. Even that stubborn 5 kilo, 10 kilo, that they're
yeah.
just, it's not budging. They will be counting calories and it's still nothing. Yeah.
It's not a calorie in, calorie out
No,
thing. Never
right.
count calories. That calorie in, calorie out model is dead wrong. It's
Yeah.
absolutely wrong. Unless you eat too little calories, and then yes, you're going to slow down your metabolism. That's a problem.
What about protein for like a protein per body weight? You know, when you're calculating approximately like 1.3 grams per kilo, you're trying to build muscle, trying to lose weight. What about sort of the macro and the micro calories that we're trying to also build on?
I absolutely love having this conversation. So there's this little meme that I saw that says calories are these tiny little fairies that go
Yeah.
into your closet at night and sew your clothes tighter.
Oh, okay. Right.
And I would agree with that. They're these mythical little creatures.
Yeah.
And I don't count macros either
Right.
because too many people are counting calories and not enough are counting cortisol. When you start
Oh,
looking at the hormone balance is key.
yeah.
So if you have high cortisol, what fuel source is your body using?
Mm,
You're in fight or flight. Your
correct. Yeah.
muscles are getting all the blood flow.
Yeah.
You're
It's
not
going
getting
nowhere else.
any
Mm,
You're not getting blood flow to the stomach, to the intestinal tract. It's really the muscles,
yeah.
right? So your body is breaking down protein as a fuel source at that point in
Yes.
time.
Yes.
So if you're eating your macros and you're kind of saying, okay, what's the percentage or like how many
Mm,
grams of protein, you're
correct.
also looking at how many grams of carbohydrates and how many grams of fat. And I'll tell
Mm,
you, if your cortisol levels are high, you're going to be burning through those proteins. So you
yes.
can't use the do I do one? Do I do 1.3? What's my
Yeah,
exercise and activity like?
exactly.
You've got to be saying, hey, listen, if you have high cortisol, you're not going to be burning your carbohydrates as fuel and you're not
Yeah.
going to be burning your fat as fuel. You're just not.
Mm, yeah.
So now it becomes like, how much protein can you eat? And
Mm,
if you're doing that, and then if you, depending on the exercise that you're doing, high
So the type of
intensity,
exercise, yeah, is also going to
it's
vary, and how much and how long and what time you're doing the exercise. That is also around hormones as well. Like, should you be exercising when cortisol levels are high? Because I've heard within the first half hour upon waking, or I think it's 10 hours after waking, like there's certain times where your cortisol is more peaked for you to actually get more out of it. Or you're doing it when you're tired, like, middle of the day or just after lunch. Also, yeah, like you were saying, high intensity. Are you doing yoga? Are you doing weights? Like, what constitute that type of exercise and how frequent? So yeah, I'd love for you to, yeah, go into that a little bit because most people are just doing the same thing every day. Like I go to the gym and I see people at the same time every day, all walks of life, all ages, and it's yeah, should
yeah.
we be mixing it up?
Absolutely, you should be mixing it up, but you should be designing it according to your genetics, which are hugely important,
Mm.
and also according to your biochemistry. So at one particular point in time, when I was in my mid 30s, and I'm diagnosed with polycystic ovaries, and I thought like I'm thin fairly, like, but I've
Yeah.
got this belly, this pooch, like what's going on? And so I'm like, well, I'm just going to be on the treadmill. I was doing like at least an hour, sometimes an hour
Wow.
and a half on the treadmill because I thought, oh, I'm going to like train for a half marathon. I'll lean out.
Mm-hmm.
And then I thought, well, and then I'm going to do some weights because I want to, keep the muscle mass up. And I was gaining weight. And
Wow.
so I stopped doing that and I started doing yoga and walking. And I ended up seeing one of the personal trainers. He's like, "Oh, you started weights, didn't you?" And I'm like, "No, I stopped it."
What? Right.
And the
Bit of
look
yin
of
and yang,
shock on his
right? We talk
face.
about how your body needs, yeah, you do need some of the cardio, but you also have to realize just some gentle walking, stretching, yoga is also, you need a bit of both. Yeah.
And for me, the hormones were out of balance because of the stress.
Of
So
doing
it
high
wasn't
intensity.
appropriate for me to do
Yeah.
any cardio, high intensity
Wow.
cardio, because any high intensity cardio at that point in time was raising my cortisol.
Yeah.
And so, what I learned later on in life is to look at genetics, and you can actually tell should you be doing more HIIT training? Should you be
Yes.
doing more endurance training? Should you be training for a half marathon? Should you be doing
Mm,
more yoga, more Pilates, more weights? Like, what does your body actually want?
yeah.
What is it genetically designed and built
Hmm.
for?
And that's why
And
some of
so,
the Africans, like the Olympians, right? A lot of the countries do test and say, you are actually better at this sport, right? You're
mhm,
more prone as a runner, you're more prone as a swimmer, you're better off as a basketballer, right? Our bodies are built differently and we can't all do the same type of exercise, right? It makes sense,
yeah,
especially women. We're not men where they can do whatever they want, usually. Bit better.
abs-
Yeah.
yeah.
We're built differently, cycles and everything. Yeah.
And when I work with a lot of my female athletes, that's
Hmm.
exactly what I look at.
Yeah.
How is that training affecting your hormones?
Yes.
Because for a lot of
They lose their
athletes,
periods sometimes if they're overworking.
they
The elite
do.
athletes, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, they will. And so there's this myth that, oh, if a female gets down below 14% body
Yep.
fat and down into lower body
Yeah.
fat percentages, that she's going to lose her menstrual cycle.
Yeah.
And I would say it's a myth because it depends on how you're doing it. If you're doing it
Right.
how we've been traditionally doing it, where you're forcing your body and starving your body and training your body, like a lot of women are working out like men. They're being trained like
Yes. Because they've been trained by men. They don't understand, no matter how much they're studying it, they don't feel it. They don't go through the same cycles we go through, right? They don't feel
the
the hormonal shifts through
hormones
their
are
menstrual cycle. Yeah.
the hormones are different and it's going to
Mm.
affect and impact performance. And so when you're using those traditional methods to drop body fat percentage, yes, you're going to shock the body and the
Yeah.
body is going to go and a female is going to lose her menstrual cycle because the body's in shock. The way that
Mm.
I did it without counting calories, still with fueling my body and without the intensity, my body just snapped into shape and it was
Wow.
fine.
Let's
Didn't
talk
affect my.
quickly. I'd love to just mention quickly about intermittent fasting, just while we're on the whole sort of what do we eat? What's your experience and your take on intermittent fasting? Should we be doing it? Is there a way to intermittent fast? And yeah, just what your experience is with intermittent fasting.
I think this is a really great question. And it's one that so many women are really interested in, but getting a lot of different and conflicting
Yeah.
advice
Yes.
about.
Correct.
So, first of all, with intermittent fasting, there's a number of different ways of doing intermittent fasting. So, right now, what's really popular is one that is called 18-6,
Yeah.
where you don't eat for
Single
18
eating.
hours, you do
Hmm.
eat for six.
Hmm.
That's very, very popular. It works very well for men. And men who use this along with a ketogenic way of eating,
Yes.
they shred. They
Yep.
turn into Adonis. You watch
Yeah.
them melt and like
That's it.
sculpt into this Greek statue in front of
Yes.
your eyes.
Yes.
You're like, oh my God, they all look like David.
Hmm.
What happened?
Well, yep. Six pack and all. Yep.
Yes. And every single woman that I know, almost every single,
Uh-huh.
there's a woman that I know gets an exactly opposite
Opposite.
result.
Yeah.
Either they don't lose the weight as fast, they don't lose much, or for my experience, because I try everything before I'll recommend it for a patient. When I tried it, um, my hormones went so far out of balance. I gained weight
Yeah.
and I lost my mind. I was
Yeah.
not pretty. I was like, from a hormonal perspective, I was mood perspective, I was ugly. It was
Mm.
not good.
Yeah.
And so that way of eating, we have to remember that for women, our hormones can go
Yeah.
off balance really quickly when it feels and perceives that the environment is stressful.
Exactly. Yeah. It's under threat. And then,
And
like, we don't know when
so,
our next meal is coming. We feel like, yeah, we have to store all this body fat, right? Because it's a long time before our next meal.
and what will happen is the body, the brain will say, hey, wait a minute. If we don't know when the next meal is coming and you get pregnant, the baby's going to die and so are you.
Yes.
We got to shut this down. We're shutting down the hormones. That's
Mm.
basically what's happening. And so your body is really beautifully designed to protect you from dying. It's
Hmm.
really great
The
at
first thing it
that.
wants to do is protect. Yeah, exactly. Keep you
Right,
alive. Yeah.
right. And so, if it throws off your hormones so you can't get pregnant and then makes you irritable enough that no one's going to want to get near you anyways, that's really good
Yes,
contraceptive.
I know. It's a
So,
big thing. Yeah, when people are trying to conceive, I see it with my own clients, they're doing this crazy intermittent fast. And I'm like, we are trying to build your body to have a baby. You need to eat right, but also be eating regularly and making sure that your body is in sync. Your hormones are in sync, especially when you're menstruating, right? It's not the time to be doing intermittent fasting, right? And not
now,
doing it well. They just
now
think,
there
oh, if I
are
just eat in this 6 hours, I could be eating rubbish. Then what are they eating in the 6 hours is another question.
Well, there is. And then there's also, but let's kind of take a look at some of the other forms of intermittent fasting. So, because there are some that can be very healthy for women and
Yeah.
can be helpful for
In the
setting
short
women
term.
up.
In the short term, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, there's a type of intermittent fasting called 5-2, where you
Yes.
eat normally 5 days of the week and 2 days of
Hmm.
the week you fast.
Yeah.
And that fasting can be just even lowering the calories to
Yeah.
500 calories or less.
Hmm.
And there's some health benefits for that.
Hmm.
Then there's the fasting that's done during Ramadan,
Hmm.
which
Yeah.
is also, I know, in the Catholic tradition, they do it as well. It's called dry
Yes.
fast.
Yes. Yeah.
And so you don't eat from basically sundown to sunup.
Until.
You don't eat anything and you don't drink anything.
Yeah.
And if you do that in a healthy way,
Hmm.
introduce foods properly at the end of it,
Yes. Where they're having a
then
big meal as soon as the sun comes down, they were eating a massive feast, right?
if
Yeah.
you do it properly and nourish your body and fuel your body,
Mm.
that is actually considered from the studies to be the healthiest form of fasting
Would you
from
do
what
that
we've seen.
often, like the sort of fasting for a whole month? Would that be once a year, would you suggest? Or just maybe if they're needing to, I guess it's on a client by
Well,
client.
yeah, it is by client because what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to make sure it's appropriate for you. You're going to
Yeah.
want to make sure it's meeting your nutritional needs. You want to make sure that you're doing it properly because if you don't, there's an unhealthy way of doing it. And people
Yeah.
who are in Middle Eastern countries
Yes.
love to talk about the stories of my uncle
Oh,
ended up in the hospital when he did, so there's
yes.
ways of doing it in an unhealthy way. But I think to pair anything with a spiritual practice
Yeah.
is absolutely beautiful and will
Yes.
give you even better results. And you and I have kind of talked a little bit about the mind-body connection, but
Hmm.
I think this is a really great way to segue into it
Yeah.
because the different types of fasting if you do a fast, like that's a juice fast, and you do a
Hmm.
juice fast longer than 3 days, you're
Mm,
actually going to be accessing stem cell regeneration. And so there's benefits to doing different types of fasting at different
yeah,
times.
yeah,
But when you can use it as a process to connect you to your emotions, to your
yes,
community,
yes.
to your spiritual connection, your spiritual peace, there's even greater benefits.
I love that. And it's just even when people are eating, even if you're eating lunch or eating breakfast, like there's a lot of practice where you just eat mindfully, you give thanks, whether it's a prayer, but just really realize that this food is going to nourish you. And also eating in silence is another thing. Just being grateful for his food, but just not talking and scoffing your food down. So many people are eating on the run or, they're rushing their food down. And just the practice of being mindful, like that whole spiritual practice you mentioned. But if your body just takes a second to be grateful for the food, to realize that you're going to nourish your body. And it's so different. The energy from that is so different than you just scoffing your food down just to get something in because you need the sugar hit or something like that. Especially with like,
Absolutely.
yeah, people that are always on the go.
And you and I were talking, before we started recording about hypnosis and about really looking at the emotions and the
Yes.
effect of the emotions on hormones. And
Yeah.
I don't think people really understand how powerful that connection is.
Hmm.
And there were some really great studies out of the UK on women who are actually midwives. And they did a number of different studies showing that when we take a look at children who have been through a traumatic experience, mental abuse, physical abuse,
Yeah.
sexual abuse at a very early age,
Yeah.
if we look at what happens to them, it affects their brain development. It
Yes.
affects how their hormones are produced throughout their lives. And what we actually are seeing is that in that population that was studied, that women who have early childhood traumas
Yeah.
have a greater and more impactful, negatively impactful experience of
Yeah.
menopause than women who don't.
And even just the binge eating, from my experience, I've seen anyone with trauma, those who are really overweight, but when you ask them, what their childhood was like, they all went through trauma. They're eating as a comfort, right? And then they're shifting. So then you're just dealing not only with how to get them back on the sort of right food plan, but also that mental emotional stuff what we're trying to unpack as well. So it's a whole road of really looking at everything in alignment, like we just mentioned, the spiritual, but looking at what traumas were there, what caused them to eat this way, why is their body shut down, why is their cortisol level so high? And I find that not many people cover looking back in their traumas. And like we were mentioning before as well, before the call about even IVF and just going down that route. But it's like if there's something deeper, if there could be, the trauma of, perhaps their own upbringing with their parents and innately unconsciously they're fearful of being a mother or what's going to happen when they have a child of their own due to their own experiences and upbringing. So, yeah, powerful, powerful things about the mind body connection.
Right. And so we're seeing that, hey, if you've had that traumatic childhood, that could impact even the amount of progesterone levels
Yeah.
in your system as you reach puberty, as you go through your regular menstrual cycle, as you try to conceive, and then
Mm,
again, even further on into your perimenopausal
yes.
and postmenopausal
Yeah.
years. That's pretty impactful,
Yeah.
especially, most women who are in their menopausal years and perimenopausal years, even who are of a childbirth years or the reproductive years, most of them aren't sitting back and saying, well, what happened when I was 2? What happened when I was 5?
Yeah.
What happened when I was 7? And could those emotions be affecting
Mm,
this right now?
exactly.
Even if you're feeling fine about it, even if you've done a lot of the
Yeah.
work to unpack it and the
Yeah.
emotional work to unpack it, it affects how your brain is wired and
Exactly.
how those
Yeah.
hormones are being produced by the pituitary, by the
Mm,
hypothalamus, by the actual brain itself. So those are some really important things to take a look at as you move forward.
There's so much to unpack, Val. We could be talking for ages, but just I guess as we wrap up, I'd love you to just you were mentioning all the different stages. Is there something you can mention just the differences that you see with obviously women who are in their 20s, their 30s and 40s? Is there something different that they should be aware of? I guess there's people listening from all different ages, but just something to take away. Like if you're in your 20s, is there something you should look out for in your 30s, 40s, and I guess in 50s as they're going to perimenopause and into menopause?
Yeah, I think the most important thing that I want to tell women in their 20s, 30s, and 40s is that it keeps getting better.
Yeah.
So,
When your periods are gone, it's supposed to be the greatest years in your 50s, correct?
well, I had heard from Oprah that
Yes.
when a woman reaches her 40s, that was the power decade. And I
Yeah.
was like, that's great. And I got into my 40s and there was a lot that was amazing in my 40s.
Hmm.
The 50s, I'm saying like I'm loving it even more than the 40s.
Yes.
And so, one of the things that I also remember hearing from one of my colleagues, she was a massage therapist that I worked with in the past, and she would say, "Oh, I love women in their 40s. They know their bodies and they've got it dialed in." And I'm like, "Yeah, they do."
Yeah.
And so it's when, as we move through the generations, as we start moving to our through our 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, we get a better understanding of what's happening within our body, how to nurture it, how to honor it, how to care for it. And it just keeps getting better. So you should be, in terms of, any type of PMS, you shouldn't have any PMS. You shouldn't have any symptoms around the time your menstrual cycle comes. It's
No,
common, but what's normal is it
not
comes,
correct.
goes, that's it.
That's it. Yeah.
In your 30s, in your 20s and 30s, as you're wanting to get pregnant, it shouldn't be taking you that much time to really get pregnant.
No.
You still got a lot of time, go for it.
Yes.
When you're moving into your 40s, you don't have to have any symptoms of perimenopause. And even as you get into your 50s, as you start to move into that time of life where the menstrual cycle is just slowly winding down, you shouldn't have to have any of the symptoms associated with menopause. Your menstrual cycle is designed and built to stop at a certain point in time. That is normal. It's supposed to do that. Let it happen.
Yeah. Would you
Uh,
say that what you're going through with your parents, like, have you seen that it's common for what the parents went through if they're the daughter, if they were asking what their mums went through, is it similar? Have you seen similarities between parents going through menopause and their daughters?
A lot of the time, yes. I
Okay.
usually will say to my patients, like, look, whatever age that your mom went into menopause, that's
Mm,
when you're likely to do that.
approximately. Yeah.
Now, what I have had, with respect to some of my patients, is like, hey, my mom went into menopause early. It was chemically induced, or
Right. Or
she
they
was
went through
given a
cancer or something.
hysterectomy,
Yeah.
or exactly. Or, it was
Health
just a
condition.
different time,
Mm.
a different time of medicine, and they just yanked them out like they were tonsils,
Yes, yes, I know. Hysterectomy, hysterectomy. Like even my mother went
Right.
through one. They found a fibroid hysterectomy. It's just that was the answer, and they got butchered. That's not the keyhole surgery. It was cut from left to right. That's
Yeah.
different times back then. Yeah.
Different time and
A
different
lot of
thought.
men who are obese. I don't think there are a lot of women obese, right? So they're like, well, just cut it out. You've had your
Yeah,
children,
don't
cut it
need this.
out.
Yeah, yeah. What do you need that for?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So, it was a different time of medicine. So
Mm.
you don't know for sure. But yes, usually around the same time that your mom went into menopause, that's when you should. But again, a lot of the symptoms and a lot of the discomfort, that doesn't have to happen. And if you are there with awareness and you have good practitioners around you, there's a lot of tools that can help you move through that without the
Yeah.
discomfort while keeping you healthy and without increasing your risk of different diseases that are associated with if the estrogen goes too low, for example.
And then just, I guess, with the perimenopause, the menopause, like, what is your take on people on HRT? That's very common, less common now, I guess, with a lot of studies coming out that it's not the way to go as it leads to breast cancer. So if people are going through that, I guess naturopathic medicine, but those who are on HRT, what is your experience with that?
Yeah, so with respect to the hormones shifting, there's a lot that you can do to support the body so that you don't have to have those symptoms.
Yeah.
Now, there is a small percentage of women who their symptoms are so bad
Yeah.
and they're happening that the first thing that we want to do is get them feeling good.
Yes. Yeah.
As quality of life is the most important
Mm.
thing. And so at that point in time, I would say definitely go and talk to a medical doctor or a
Yeah.
naturopath who is trained in natural hormone replacement therapy.
Yes. Yeah.
Because when we look at hormone replacement therapy, Premarin, the way
Mm.
that it's been used when it first came out, it was not natural at all. It was very synthetic. And those type of estrogen and hormone replacement therapy, that type of estrogen and progesterone has a lot of potential side effects, and yes, can be associated with an increased risk in cancer. But there are a lot of natural hormone replacement therapies, biased, natural progesterones,
Yes.
different natural DHEA that you take
Mm.
sublingually instead of orally that actually can be very helpful, not just for getting rid of symptoms, but have been shown to decrease a woman's risk of estrogen related cancers and hormonal related cancers. So I think it's really important, first of all, that quality of life is number one. I
Yeah.
don't want to shame
People
any woman.
suffering for it's the worst when you're suffering. You'll do anything just to take away the suffering. So even for
Absolutely.
short term and then look at long-term solutions.
And you have to be sleeping.
Yeah.
You have to have a good quality of life. If it's affecting your mental health, that's got to change. Now, the conversations that you have around it, can we do other things first and
Yeah.
use natural hormone replacement therapy as a last line of defense? Absolutely, that's an option. Or can we use it to get rid of the symptoms, start healing up the body, and then work to come off of that later on? All of those are possibilities, and those are great discussions to have, but you want to have them with qualified healthcare practitioners.
Yes.
And you want to, everybody will agree less is best. If you don't
Yeah.
have to be on it, great. But I think everybody will also agree that quality of life is absolutely critical. And if you need it, the natural hormone replacement therapy is a very good and
Mm.
viable option.
Because there's nothing worse than not sleeping at night due to your hot flushes, and they're going on for years, even on certain things. Like, come across clients who have been on, who've had the hot flushes, and it's been like 5 years. But like you said, it's common, but not normal, right? And it's what you're doing in the 20s, 30s, 40s, which will affect the menopause years. And people forget that. They forget that as women, we are coming up to our menopause years. And so we need to start looking at things as early as our 20s. I think that's the key, right? Get your hormones tested, get everything checked, and make sure you are exercising right, you are doing the right diet, you're working on your emotional and mental and spiritual bodies. And then when your 40s and 50s come along, there should be those golden years of your life, like you said, right? And even into your 60s, like that's supposed to be the best. Your 60s are supposed to be the best for women. Your kids are out of the house, you're living
70s.
life, you're having fun, you're retired, enjoying
Right.
life to the max, right? But for some, they're at their worst health in their 50s and 60s. So,
And there's so much you can do, I agree, to
yeah.
turn that around now, because even in your 70s and 80s, you should
Hmm.
still
Be
feel
thriving.
as energetic and vibrant as you did in your 20s
Oh,
and
my mom's
30s.
got more energy. She's in her mid 70s. She's got more energy than me at times. And she's cleaning a big house and clinic and like exercising and doing the gardening. Oh my goodness. I said, where do you get her energy from? Like she's living a great life in her 70s. But
Exactly.
it's been very healthy and it's a key. It's all of those little things that we need to do early on, like not just put a band-aid over it and just think those symptoms aren't important. Because I think your body's always telling you something. It's about whether we're in tuned and we're listening to it and looking at what else can we do to manage that better. And it's not just putting a band-aid, going to the GP, look at a whole holistic therapies, like you said. It's looking at everything from the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual so that we can get back into that alignment and live our best life. I think being happy, healthy is what most of us want at the end of the day. And there's
Absolutely.
nothing more. Oh, amazing, Val. Any last minute sort of advice you'd love to give to the listeners? Like what would you say, like a practical takeaway maybe for someone that is going through hormonal imbalance? And I guess just one last myth that you wish everyone would stop believing about their hormones.
Well, I think, the myth that I would want everybody to stop believing about their hormones is that number one, that they have to have symptoms,
Yeah.
whether it's PMS, whether it's PMDD, whether
Mhm.
it's, menopause, you don't. So it shouldn't be affecting your life in any deleterious way. And also, with respect to the hormones are going to change not because you're aging.
Yes,
That
people
can
think
be
that.
part of it, but
Mm.
but it's changing because of your environment, because of the foods that you're having, because of the sleep that you're not getting, because
Mhm.
of the stress that you're under. So if your
Mhm.
hormones are out of balance, there's a reason why your body is doing that, and let's find out what that is.
Yeah.
So you don't have to be hijacked by your hormones.
Yes.
And I would also say, let's also give ourselves credit and say hormones are real. Because what
Yes.
sometimes I see happen for women is there has been in the past a tendency for a certain group of people to say, oh, women are, because they're hormonal, they're not logical, they're hormonal, and it's labeled as
Yeah.
bad.
Yeah.
And so there's been this tendency to kind of separate ourselves from the hormones. Like, oh, hormones
Mhm.
don't exist. Hormones don't
Mm.
exist. We're all logical.
Yeah.
Yes,
Right.
we're all logical. And hormones are real. When those things go out of balance, it
Mm.
has a major impact. And men's hormones can go out of balance
Yes,
too.
I
They go through
can.
andropause and they get testy,
Yes.
they get
Yes.
testosterone, they're
Yes.
going to go out of balance too. But let's not lie and let's not pretend that hormones don't affect women. And I think there can be a tendency to just push it by the side, like, oh, hormones aren't
Mm.
so real.
Well, they
The
sort of
hormone,
come to it just when they're about to conceive. From what I see is like they'll realize they've got hormones when they're about to conceive, when they've ignored everything for like 2 decades, and they're like they want their hormones working right now, like effectively, while they're trying to have a baby and have the baby quickly, right? And then the next time they realize is during menopause, like you said, if they have or haven't had babies, but it's those two times where we actually our hormones start as soon as we hit menarche, right?
yeah,
So it's like, yeah, right from teenage years, even, well, some people as early as 9 now these days. Which is
yeah,
not normal.
yeah,
But that's another conversation. However, yes, I think it's right from the start. We should be really listening to our bodies, realizing the changes, and look at getting holistic help and look at the whole mind body connection. It's so important. Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely.
Amazing, Val. We could be talking for hours. We'll probably have to get you back for definitely other segments. There is so much to talk about in this space. But thank you so much for coming on. I hope you all got so much out of this conversation. And I'll pop Val's details in the links. And so if you want to reach out, please feel free to do so. And thank you, Val, for coming on today and sharing your knowledge with us. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much. I really appreciate you inviting me. I appreciate the time. And I would love to extend an invitation for anybody who just has questions. If they want to
Yeah.
book a fireside chat, they're quite welcome to. And for anybody who is also just wanting to do just a little retreat to get their balance, their body
Mhm.
back into balance, their hormones back into balance. I'm actually working with a beautiful woman on something called Unbreakable Health, and we're doing a retreat at a ranch in Texas,
Amazing.
outside of Austin, Texas, in March. So if people want to come, they can reach out to me, and I'd be happy to share that information with them.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, Val. I'll pop that in. So if you're up that way, we'll, yeah, reach out and yeah, it'll be amazing. Okay. Thank you so much, Val. And we'll speak to you next time.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Have a
you.
wonderful
Thank you for tuning in to the Holistic Health and Hormones podcast. If you found today's episode inspiring or informative, please don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review. It will help us reach more people just like you who are on their journey to vibrant health and balance. For more tips, resources, or to work with me, please visit my website or connect with me on socials. And remember, your health is your superpower. So keep nurturing it, and I'll see you next time.